This is Only the Strong Survive, a podcast powered by Con Media, where we dive deep into the world of business, leadership, and innovation. I'm your host, Dan Con, and I'm honored to have you join us today. So let's get ready to learn some survival skills together. Hey everybody, welcome back to Only the Strong Survive. I'm your host, Dan Con, and I'm really excited about today's show. Our guest is Lauryn Menard, a biodesigner and the CEO and founder of GOB. Lauryn made it her mission to change how we think about everyday stuff we throw away without a second thought. GOB, her company, has a really cool breakthrough product that's the world's only biodegradable earplug. She started with earplugs because she saw how often they show up wherever culture gets loud: concerts, racetracks, travel, gyms, hotels, and how billions of plastic foam pairs get used once and then thrown away. Through GOB, she's showing that performance and responsibility can live in the same tiny little product, and that even small changes can create massive ripple effects. So Lauryn, thank you for joining us. Great to have you on today.
So happy to be here. That was such a good intro.
Well, thank you. I can't take credit for it. I just read it, but shout out to producer Katie. But we are really glad to have you here. And Beth Brennan, our CMO and the president of our sister agency, Tread, speaks very highly of you. And I am really excited to hear your story. So let's kind of start at the beginning. First of all, biodesigner is sort of a new title for me. So tell me, where did that come from? I think a lot of people probably haven't heard that phrase before. How do you explain to someone what biodesign is?
Oh, it's such a good question. Even my students ask me that question because I also teach a class called Biodesign, CCA. So I would describe a biodesigner as someone who solves problems with organic matter or anything that comes from biology and is better for people and planet. And so what that means for me, and specifically, is that I'm an industrial designer. So I have spent my career designing, creating things that are mass manufactured with the added layer of introducing non-toxic, healthier materials. And so that's what it means for me. For others, the world of biodesign is very broad. There are people who are growing circuit boards out of fungi. There are people who are, in the biotech space who consider themselves biodesigners. It's very broad. But for me, it's basically just integrating healthier materials that happen to come from biological sources and putting them into mass manufacturing.
That's really cool. So it sounds like you were an industrial designer first, and then you kind of came to the sort of kind of green side of things as you worked your way into your career. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah. So basically my career started in fashion, quickly got out of that real fast.
Why?
I just recognized that I really preferred to be working on things that were function forward and solving for a problem. And the mass majority of the fashion industry was just chasing trends. And when I spent my whole childhood wanting to be in fashion because that's the only type of design I knew of. And once I got into it and I was in school, I was like, oh, I think I'm actually seeking something a little bit like zoomed out, basically, like solving for problems, seeking out problems, and designing for them. So industrial design just happened to be where I ended up, you could say, because I just started building, designing everything from furniture and footwear. I worked in the cycling industry, and I think it was after like 4 contract jobs in industrial design, I was like, oh, wait, I think I'm an industrial designer.
I am this now. Okay.
Yeah. Stumbled
Where did you go to
into it.
school?
Well, I started at Fashion Institute of Technology in Manhattan. That did not last long, as I just mentioned. I'm from the Adirondack Mountains, way up near the Quebec border in New York State. And so Manhattan was a very shocking experience for me. Within a year, I transferred over to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, where I studied in this program called Design, Innovation, and Society. Had an incredible mentor named Bert Swersey there who basically changed the way I think about the world. He's an incredible mentor to so many folks. He actually passed away, I think, about 10 years ago, but he had a massive impact on a lot of people. he told me, Lauren, someday you should move to California. The way you think and all that, it's like all that's happening in the Bay Area. And being the person I am, I took that as, oh, I should drop out of school and move there right now. So I actually moved to California, dropped out of school, and he was like, that's not what I meant, but I did it anyway. So yeah, my journey was a little bit ADHD, you could say.
Hey, that's most founders, I think. That's kind of a
Yeah.
common trait.
Yeah.
And where and when did the materials component come into it for you? When did you start actually looking at not just designing things, but like what they were made of?
I mean, one might think that I'm forcing this answer, but the real truth is when I was a kid. Because growing up in the Adirondacks, I spent my time mostly outside in the woods. My parents have still to this day the same house, same land, acres and acres of land. And I was always just, peeling back the birch bark and like cutting into wood and taking moss off of rocks and making stuff out of it. I think it actually started as early as maybe like 4 or 5 years old, if I'm being honest. And so when I got into fashion, I was like wanting to use the things I was finding in my parents' land to make clothes. So I think it started as like childhood, and then getting into design, I'd go to factories super early in my career, be shipped over to China to go oversee, let's say a cycling shoe I was working on for Specialized Bikes, and the smell of the factory and just how synthetic everything looked as I watched tens of thousands of units going down the factory line. That's what triggered, oh, I've completely lost track of where I came from and the materials that used to inspire me, having this aha moment of this is bad. I have a feeling it's bad. I don't know why it's bad, but I need to do my research. And so I just started like researching in my free time, basically, and discovered biomaterials through like Googling, basically.
Interesting. And you're kind of, you sort of referenced going to factories and stuff. Was that, I think earlier before GOB, you were with PROWL working with some really big brands, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What kind of work was that? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was contracting for many years, and I was always given this title, innovation designer, material innovation specialist, innovation consultant, like every version of that word, I had the title. And so I was like, all right, well, maybe it's time to start a firm, an agency where we do that for brands. And so co-founded PROWL with my business partner, Bailey. We were very lucky to work with everyone from BMW, Target, Herman Miller, really big names, coming in and looking at their supply chain and basically looking for opportunities for improvement. So looking at usually we'd be tasked with a single product that they're looking at that they have as one of their core bestsellers. This is like basically most of our projects were looking at their bestseller, understanding holistically like how it's manufactured, what are all the parts that go into it, what are all the ingredients and materials, how do we reduce that, and then how do we replace the ones that are bad for you and like never ever going to break down. So sometimes we would get to a successful place and we'd launch something with them. But sometimes we would just like, with this type of work, you don't always find the solution. And sometimes that means just sunsetting the product that isn't serving your customers the way that you're advertising. So
when you're talking about companies like Herman Miller and BMW, I mean, these are big global brands with huge, giant P&Ls and boards and, corporate officers. And in my experience, generally those types of, at scale, those types of companies are really focused on they're always focused on profitability, but they're also trying to figure out on the supply chain side, they tend to be either looking for a better deal or maybe a better product. What was it like communicating with and integrating with sort of their leadership when you're going like, hey, this thing that's a huge chunk of your balance of your revenue has some problematic components and we might want to change it. Are they open to that, or is it like a fight?
Both.
Okay.
They open up the gates, but it's still a fight. most of the time. The companies you just mentioned have incredibly talented and good-hearted people working on this exact thing, and they tend to bring in folks like PROWL to help have an outsider perspective. So just the fact that they're opening up the door and bringing out outside specialists, I think, is proof that they care. However, the balance sheet always matters, no matter what. And so there's this kind of like negotiation you have to have with your supply chain, with your leadership, with the designers, where it's like, all right, well, you can completely sunset all of the products that you find to be problematic in your research when you pull back all the layers and have a very honest look at your supply chain and your materials you're using. And like what you do with that information is up to you. You can be very public and say, hey, we're working on it. We're doing the best we can. You can edit your environmental goals to be more achievable, like Pepsi and Coca-Cola both do that, where
So
they'll
they
lower the barrier.
they lower the standard to sort of make sure they can hit the goal.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And there's proof that they do that. But the brands that we worked with did not do that, to be clear. But I'd say the negotiation was always, well, all right, do we do this as a small run first, whatever we're working on with them, test it and see the traction. And then, more of like a bite-sized approach sometimes is needed. However, I think that there's also, a world in which the stories need to be told. And so oftentimes we were just going in and taking the products that they were doing research on, like say, for example, it's a chair, say we're looking at a chair and we discover that the finish on the chair has really a lot of VOCs. It's like really bad for you. It off gases. Well, what we can do to buy us some time is we can tell a story about how they are working towards a better alternative, but the honesty builds trust with their customer. And so sometimes it's like a 5-year process, and it starts with, hey, customers, we want to let you know we're working on this because we don't want to hide it. And we want to let you know that it's coming. And I think that does just as much good as, anything else. So it's a trust building exercise most of the time. And leadership tends to be really open to that for the most part. Depends on who you're talking to, of course, but it's different for every single company that we ever entered. And, BMW, they're so innovative. They have a whole arm of their business that's just basically constantly experimenting, so that's kind of where we slotted in.
Interesting. Well, it sounds like the brands you've worked with in the past are also genuinely committed to trying to make positive change when possible. And I'm sure not just having a marketing bullet point that they can check, right? So it sounds like that's helpful.
I think most people are wanting to do the right thing. And the less and less open they become because of, say, P&L or, hey, we just got to sell some product to survive. That's also trying to do the best thing for the business because businesses employ people and people's livelihoods and their families depend on that, right? There's always a chain of effect there. And so I do always, maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I believe that people do want to do the right thing. It's just a matter of timing and resources.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know you in the past, you've talked about kind of designing with end of life in mind. Kind of starting from what happens after the product is used and working backwards. Where did that philosophy come from?
Basically, Bailey and I, when we started the business, we were trying to understand what the most basic principle could be in quote unquote responsible design. What does that look like? And what we uncovered is everything was leading back to something's end of life. Because a product, no matter if you're talking about a massive dump truck with 1 million moving parts, or you're talking about, an earplug, it's nothing but materials at the end of the day. And once something is no longer usable, it's obsolete, you don't need it anymore, all that's left are materials. You completely peel everything away. That's what you get. And so what we came up with was basically begin with the end, what became an ethos and how we still work with GOB. And it's this ethos and idea that when you start thinking about a product, you have to think about its end of life just as much as its form and function. And if anything, its form and function, it informs that. And so one of our clients, I don't know if you've heard of them, they're really cool. It's this EV RV called Lightship.
Yeah.
We came into Lightship when it was nothing but a shell, and we worked with their team. I think it was 4 people at the time. I think they had 3 internal people plus us, and we needed to design the interior. We did everything with them, from the layout to the materials to the build out to the form. Something like Lightship, our thinking there was this should last generations. Mm-hmm. Someone buys this in their 30s, their kids are going to grow up, their kids are going to get older, move out of the house, then maybe they retire with this thing. This shouldn't be something that's disposable. So the begin with the end for that looked like, let's make this durable and modular so it can like change with someone's lifestyle as they evolve and age. Mind you, that's very different from something that you use for 8 seconds and then you do it again the next day, right?
But I like that philosophy, because I've had some experience in the RV industry, and the majority, like 90-something% of RVs come out of one town in Indiana, and they're all kind of the same thing, and they have different brand names on them, but it's a fiberglass box. Yep. Which fiberglass in itself is not super environmentally friendly. And then there's foam core inside of the fiberglass, and they are kind of disposable. So having kind of just having something that'll stick on the road for 2 or 3 times as long, I think is a sustainable message. So I love that.
Yeah. The Lightship team is, I think, way ahead of the curve, and they're great.
You made a comment earlier, and I'm curious if it was a Stephen Covey reference. You said begin with the end. You mean like begin with the end in mind?
It's not that exact thing, but people have brought that up before.
Yeah, I love that quote.
I love that too. Yeah.
That's cool. So one of the other questions, and I want to kind of move on to GOB a little bit, but I am curious, when you were with PROWL and you're working with these big companies, and you kind of referenced earlier that, visiting factories and all that, I am curious. Certainly in my experience working with manufacturers here in this country, there is an openness to, like you said, as long as it's not a huge impact on the bottom line, I think most companies, you recognize that, hey, like if we can be a little more sustainable, A, it's good, and B, it's a good marketing message too. So there's sort of a win-win there, and we can kind of feel a little better about things, and they seem to be open to it. What's it like when you go to China, where a lot of these factories exist? Does that same awareness exist, or is it a tougher sell? Culturally, are they aware of and open to that kind of thing, or no?
I would say they're more open than we are.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think what a lot of people, maybe who haven't been to China, haven't stepped foot in an Asian factory. Yeah. Okay. It's a different world. You go there and almost no part of life in America is applicable there. Like, it's just a completely different world culturally, the way it functions, social norms, everything. But the factories in China have primarily been set up for Americans. Like, they serve the rest of the world, and they are like truly the most collaborative partners to this day. So when tariffs started to come into play, most of the people that I was in touch with were actually in China. We're reaching out saying, hey, we'll do anything we can to continue working with you. And they often took a cut for us. Wow. And that's something that's happening that a lot of people don't know. And I want that to be heard, because I think a lot of times we think of, oh, they're just, using us, or we need to move everything on shore. But globalization has been enabled by this partnership of America and China, right? And India and Vietnam and all these other parts of Asia. And when an American goes to a factory in China, you're treated like a king or queen. Like, you are royalty, and they make sure that you have the best time ever. So when you come to them and you say, hey, we've been partnering together for a while, and obviously I'm generalizing right now, but in my experience, hey, we've been partnering together for a while. We want to try out this new material. What can we do? 9 times out of 10, it's going to be an enthusiastic, yes, let's try it. It might not work, but yes, let's try it. And I will say that I'm witnessing Europe surpass us in a lot of environmental and human health progress in new products because their legislation is holding them accountable. So if you look at, for example, chemicals that are banned in foods in Europe versus in the United States, they've banned, I think, 1,200 chemicals or something like that, and we've banned 9, just to put things into perspective. And, that's a bipartisan thing, right? That's just like health is important to everyone. And so when it comes to, like, those folks are working with Asia too. In Europe, they are manufacturing there, they're partnering with them. So Asia kind of has their fingers on the pulse in manufacturing of what the rest of the world is doing. And so I truly believe that you just have to find the right partners. It's actually been more difficult to find partners with new and innovative materials in the United States to scale with. This is a whole other can of worms. But a lot of new innovative material companies here in the United States went through this bubble burst, and it's happening right now, that I don't know if you heard about, like, the consumer world, companies like Casper mattresses, Away luggage. They're all huge brands now, but they took on hundreds of millions of dollars in investment, and they never became profitable, and they're hurting because of it. Same thing happened in the healthier material world here in the United States. Alternative leather companies, alternative rubber companies, some in the Midwest. This one awesome company called Natural Fiber Welding in the Midwest. Really cool company. They went under because they took on too much investment and then couldn't get it right. So it'll be interesting to see what happens on shore here with those types of companies as these lessons are learned. I think Asia and Europe are ahead of us. So we'll
Interesting.
see.
Okay. That's great. I actually love hearing that. And, I do get that feedback from the manufacturers that we know and talk to as well, that they've said the same thing. When you go there, you're basically royalty. So it's good to hear that. And I also, I think current politics aside, this is a global, we just came back from a trade show a couple of weeks ago, and one of our clients had this little, like, kind of informal luncheon he put together the day before the show where he had a bunch of manufacturing companies there, and I was sort of the fly on the wall just listening, and they were just talking about the same thing. Like, the supply chain is global, whether you like it or not. And even if you can find a shop, say you're making something out of metal, even if you can find a machine shop locally here in this country that can do the work, the metal's probably coming from somewhere else. And even if it's not, the prices are still going to be high because they have to compete, or they don't, but because they're competing with suppliers that are now charging extra because of the tariffs. So now they're like, well, we can raise our prices too. So, like, either way, like, it's all tied together. So
it's so true. And knowledge workers in America is where everyone's moving. A lot of Americans are knowledge workers working at desks, working on things like AI.
I was going to say that might be changing pretty soon. So I don't know.
We shall see. We shall see. But I just think, like, we've built this beautiful global economy and supply chain. It's such a bummer to not be able to fully just keep on growing it and take advantage of it. I think we will get back to a place where things feel pretty good. But I think we're just in part of, like, a massive reset right now.
That makes sense. Yeah. Well, let's talk about GOB a little bit. The small product, big problem insight, I think, is really interesting. And I like to go to the range. I like skeet and trap shooting. My oldest daughter has started getting into it with me. So we go to the range at least once a month. Yeah, it's fun. And I actually, unfortunately, I have significant hearing loss as a result of not using ear protection when I was younger. So I now have to wear hearing aids full time. So I'm pretty hardcore with my kids about whether we're around something with a loud engine or at a concert or going to the range. Like, I take it very seriously because when I started having to wear hearing aids in my late 30s, that was problematic for me. So And I mean, I think anyone who's involved in anything like that, like live music or shooting sports or anything, knows about the big kind of bucket of orange,
The jug.
the jug, right? And so I'm just like, what made you zoom in on that category? Because I mean, I totally see the use case, but that seems so kind of obscure. Like, how did you find that?
Oh man, how did I find that? That's a really good way to pose the question. I think it's more like it would be shocking if I had the expertise that I have and I didn't find it, because there are so many layers that led me to it. So my mom also has to wear hearing aids. She's legally deaf without them. And so that got me thinking a lot about just hearing protection. On top of that, my husband's in a hardcore band.
Okay.
I come from a family, my sister and my dad are chief and assistant chief of a volunteer fire department. Very loud. They wear earplugs all the time. And I have trouble sleeping. So earplugs were just like in my bags, in my pockets. Like you could imagine, just like they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that I was at a spin class in New York City on a business trip. And, you know, I'm an athlete. I have to get my energy out when I'm traveling too. And so I was at a spin class and it was way too loud. So I left the studio for a minute to grab some earplugs. And I had this moment where I was just looking at that jug you're describing, these bright orange things. And I was just like, oh my God, this is a material problem. I texted my business partner, Bailey, and I was like, dude, compostable earplugs, question mark. She was like, what, did you find them? That's weird. It's like, no, they don't exist, because I just left the studio. I was Googling it, and this is 2 years ago. And
what are those made of, the orange ones you see everywhere?
they're polyurethane foam and PVC coating. So basically, they're memory foam that is a byproduct of the process of taking petroleum into, you know, oil and other things. In refineries, they are, you know, at a refinery, they're taking petroleum, they're processing it, and basically the chemical that floats up to the top of the tank is taken out and it's processed into plastic. That exact chemical is mixed with other chemicals and air to create polyurethane foam.
That's what memory foam is?
That's what it is. Unless
no
it's
idea.
completely natural latex, which comes from a rubber tree. It is pure plastic.
And you're sticking that in your ear every night.
Yeah, and you're sleeping on top of it. It's in your pillowcase. That's why when you unwrap a brand new, you know, foam mattress,
Yeah.
you're breathing in those chemicals.
Yeah, it smells like solvent.
Good.
Interesting.
Right.
Okay.
So a lot of people actually get rashes from earplugs. That was never the case for me, but I was like, damn, I go to great lengths to eat healthy, you know, wear, you know, nice materials and have less and less plastic in my life, and I was using these little things every day, and I was like, wait, what the hell am I doing?
So you come up with this idea, you're at the spin class and you see it, and then if I think I'm right, it's mycelium. Is that what you decided?
That's right.
So is that a mushroom byproduct? Is that what that is? What is mycelium?
Mycelium is magical ingredient, but basically it's the root structure of a mushroom.
Okay.
Some people who are in the fungi world, they're like, it's neither plant nor animal, and it lives in its own kingdom. I don't go that deep with how we talk about our product, because people are like, I can't understand that. It's just
what does that
earplug.
mean? Okay.
The way that I describe it to people is our material supplier, who, by the way, I stayed in touch with since we were in school at RPI together. They invented it while we were in school. They invented mycelium packaging and then eventually invented this foam. Basically, when I was like, all right, the world produces 40 billion of these things every year, and it's going up, and they're made out of foam. 40 billion with a B.
Wow.
Yep. And that number is going up by 10% every year because of education around hearing protection. So I started reaching out to every single foam material company I knew of. And, you know, my network was very broad and very dense, I would say, in that world. But we were looking for something that was home compostable, super comfortable, and sound dampening. And nothing existed except this one foam. We tested like 60 foams.
Wow.
And either they weren't ready to scale, they weren't comfortable, they made crinkly sounds. They said they were bio-based, but they weren't. And turns out that this material just happened to be the one that worked naturally. It's kind of
That's really
crazy.
cool.
Yeah.
And so they're soft, they're, I assume, some sort of kind of compliant. How do you test like sound reduction? How does, like, you can't like put a probe in someone's head. So how do you do that?
It's the dumbest thing ever. They literally take 20 people, you put them in a chair one by one, they put an earplug in your ear, and they play a sound on a little machine, different decibel ratings. And they say, I heard it, I didn't hear it. And they're like, if you hear a sound, you go like this. If you didn't, you don't do anything. That's literally what they do.
So the sound, so the probe is their eardrum. It's wow.
But
That's
there's
old
no
school.
testing of these people. It basically is. It was so shocking to me. I was like, truly, there should be some state of the art machine.
Yeah.
No,
So I was thinking some lab somewhere that has like a robot. Nothing. Okay.
no. 20 people who happen to work in the lab. You don't know how good or bad their hearing already is, and you get their rating.
Interesting. Okay. And what was that first, when you land on this product, you now have a material you can work with. Explain the process you went through to kind of bring that to market. What was that like? Did it work right out of the gate? Did people get it? Was there like a struggle to get people to understand there's a use case here? How was that all for you?
Well, I started socializing it with like people in the music industry, people in, the sleep world, the health world. We brought on an audiologist in Berkeley, which is near where our office is, to make sure that he was our BS detector. Like, is this actually working? Because we didn't. You can have your own biases when you have an idea and you think it's working, and then you get to launch and then no one checked you. That's
Right.
what we wanted to avoid. So we brought on those people, but we were the first people to commercialize a product out of this material. So we had to learn how to work with it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It dulls blades. You can't manufacture a product in the same way that foam earplugs are made conventionally, which is basically shooting plastic goo into a mold and then dumping them out. We were working with these massive fluffy sheets of mycelium, and so we basically had to build out our own custom manufacturing process. Took about 6 months. We just started testing different ways of working with it. We were working, rapid prototyping. We had like waffle makers. We had all kinds of like off the shelf machines we were testing with. And then we found what worked and we scaled it and patented the way we make them, by the way, because took us long enough to figure out. But really, truly, when we first received the material, we just, cut out some cylinders and shoved them in our own ears. And we were like, this works. Can you hear me?
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. And so once you figure out a process, and I like that you've kind of got this patent out and you start to figure out, okay, no, we have a product, we have a use case, we know how to manufacture it. Mm-hmm. Are you still running PROWL at the same time? Are you trying to do kind of two at once?
No, I made the decision last July once, the Billie Eilish's team caught wind of us and we had them test, like her touring team behind the scenes. They tested the product and loved it. And there was something about that experience and recognizing that this could be more than just an earplug company. And there was also a very personal thing that happened that summer. My grandmother, who I was very, very close with, passed away.
I'm sorry.
And I was with her. And the day before she passed away, we were talking about GOB and PROWL. And she said to me, wise words, always listen to your grandmother. She said, you need to focus. And I was like, yeah, whatever you say. And she passed away and I was like, I think she was right. I have to give this a shot. And there's something that tells me that I might be better at running a product company than an agency, because I get to own the whole world and build the world and not just hand things off and hope that the company does something good with what we've done. And so I stepped away from PROWL, and Bailey continued to run it, and I went full throttle on GOB.
That's cool. I
Yeah.
like it. So I know a lot of sort of CEO types that are not creative. And I know a lot of creative directors who are brilliant, but are not great at kind of managing a P&L. How was that process of sort of shifting into sort of you're still creative, you're a designer, but now you're a CEO, and you also have to like launch this company, build the company, figure out culture, supply chains, distribution. I mean, what was that process like for you?
Yeah, great question. Well, I'm very, very lucky to have an incredible coach and mentor. I also have a handful of mentors that I lean on. I really believe in learning from people who have tried things and failed and also succeeded. So that's been very helpful and game changing. However, I would say that, on the PROWL front and in almost every position I held before starting the company, I always did a lot of business development. And that taught me a lot about running a business and what people care about, what moves the needle, and team building. So, team building is something that I had done a few times before. But, I think that what I've uncovered as a creative CEO is that it can be an advantage if you are willing and able to look at the things you're bad at and fill those gaps with people who are incredible at those things. So we have a COO, Marlon, who has helped scale consumer product companies before. He was at Quip, the toothbrush company. He was at Fable, the dog care company, and a few others. And he fills my gaps perfectly. And there's obviously, I need to understand the P&L. I need to understand our budget. I need to set those things. But it's more of a collaborative process. And I've seen a lot of creatively led businesses succeed. For example, Airbnb, the CEO of Airbnb, he's a designer. And that's, I believe, why they've been so successful. But he also has people, even in the early days, who fill his gaps. So I'm not trying to be the spreadsheet queen. I have no intention of that being my strength, but I need to know enough to be dangerous, right? But I think it just comes from the type of family that I grew up with. Like, I'm very, I understand my weaknesses and I understand my strengths, and I build a team that fills in my gaps.
Smart. That's good advice. I like it.
I hope it works. We'll see.
So far, so good.
So far, so good.
I did want to talk to you about it. It seems like certainly in this country, it sounds like we're a slightly different place than maybe in Europe. There's been this arc that we've been on, right? Where I think for a while, people became suddenly very aware of sort of environmental impact and sustainability. And then there was this like weird thing that sort of happened where it felt like there was a lot of greenwashing kind of going on, where like everybody is like slapping like, some sort of environmentally friendly label or marketing on their packaging, whether it was true or not. And it seemed like for a minute there, and I don't know if this is true or just my perception, then like the consumers sort of started to kind of get a little bit like, well, is this like, first of all, is this really a good product? Because I want my product. I think most people, given the option between two things of similar price and similar performance, are going to choose something that's either made of better materials or more sustainable. But
I agree.
But if the quality is poor, they're probably not going to buy it a second time, right? So at the same time, there's also this thing where I think, and to your point, like, and I have mixed feelings about some of the RFK stuff that's been going on, but like the cereal thing, I think is interesting because I have kids, right?
Yeah.
And I had no idea, and we don't try to eat a lot of sugar cereal, but like when I started seeing like the side-by-side images of like, here's the one in Europe, this uses fruit juice for dye, and here's ours, and it's like neon. I'm like, oh, that's not great.
Yeah.
So I do think most people with common sense are going to say, like, I would choose something that is more organic or more natural given the option, as long as, but like also if it tasted like garbage, my kids aren't going to eat it, right? So you have to figure out like what that balance is. How, as you approach building a business like this, how do you focus on making something that's really high quality and will be a repeat purchase for people while also accomplishing the goal of making something sustainable?
I love this question, and I expect to be learning the answer to it for the rest of my life and career. But, I think people saw, new businesses who have better ingredients, materials, they seem to be doing pretty well. Let's try and say we're doing the same, but not actually make any changes. And it created this lack of trust with consumers. You don't actually know what's in the things you're buying, but social media has made people more knowledgeable than ever. There used to be this knowledge gap where a company held all the knowledge about their product and they would tell you what it does and what it's good at, and the consumer just had to trust that. Nowadays, you can do your own research. I don't know if that's always healthy, but I think there's just again, optimistic take here. I think that we were headed in the right direction. We've swung too far down another path where nothing is actually based on science anymore. And I think we will end up somewhere in the middle ground where it will be the standard for something to be better for people, better for planet, only if legislation forces it. That's my true opinion, is like, I don't think that every company will truly comply until it's forced. Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they know how to see through greenwashing. Like, they can basically look at something and tell you. Like, I think that they have a filter that is way more trained than we do. And so to me, every new brand, if there's not an element of a health benefit and the product performing just as well as what it's replacing or claiming to be replacing, it won't go anywhere. Because, it's so easy to write a review about something and then that company doesn't exist anymore. I don't know if you saw recently this company that made skincare face masks for 3-year-olds. Very,
Did hear
very
about that.
quickly. Yeah, it was, started by a celebrity. I'll just keep it very vague. But basically, they launched it. Within 2 days, people were like, this is wrong. Also not healthy. And that company doesn't exist anymore.
Oh,
So
really? I remember sort of the uproar. I didn't know that it already, but yeah, what is a
their
3-year-old
website,
make?
their
Yeah.
website doesn't exist anymore. It goes to a 404 error page. So
Wow.
speaking of only the strong survive, I think that's going to be the case in the future, but we need to get away from this like fear mongering. Things are toxic. Everything's toxic. Stay away from palm oils, like things that aren't based in science, and just tossing things around as if like we're making these dramatic changes without stopping and thinking about it and truly questioning first. And I'm right there with you. America has built a food supply that is not even really food a lot of the times. I grew up on Lucky Charms. I love that shit, but it's not actually food.
Right.
And we just need to be more mindful, and I just think that the next generation is going to be the filter we need to figure out what's real, what's not. And does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. It sounds like you're engineering a product for that generation, which is good.
Well, yeah, we're working on a whole suite of single-use products that fit those needs. It's just sweeping up the floor of all the single-use products that are for your health, basically.
So on that note, and I'm curious, so is mycelium grown? Is it like grown in a tank or something? Like, where is it farmed? Where does it come from?
In a vertical farm, yeah.
Okay.
In these huge racks that are about 25 meters long by 5 meters wide. And every 7 days it's harvested. It grows into this really fluffy, wet, white cloud-looking material that when you touch it, it fades and pushes in. It's very wet. But basically it's harvested It's put onto these racks in a dry room where it technically dies and dries out and no longer grows, and then it's turned into foam.
How scalable is that? So as your company grows, you
Mm-hmm.
know, if you're getting that like oil byproduct you were talking about earlier, which sounds kind of
Mm-hmm.
gross, this world is cranking out a lot of oil, right? So that I'm sure there's a huge supply chain for plastic and foam products. But Mycelium, how does that scale as you grow your business?
Just to give you an idea, we get 400 units, 400 earplugs per square foot.
Oh, wow.
So if you think about, these are grown in racks of like 10 tall, 25 meters. That's millions of earplugs per week.
Oh,
We
wow.
have
Okay.
no
So it's
no
totally
supply
scalable.
issue.
Okay. That's great.
Absolutely not. It's completely renewable. How you scale that is more farms and very, very small footprint. It's endlessly scalable.
That's cool. Peter Thiel, who is an interesting person, but he did write a great book called 0 to 1, and I don't know if you've read it, but it was based on
I haven't.
it was based on a lecture he gave in Stanford Business School like a decade ago. And the kind of my favorite part of the book is he talks about when Jobs came back to Apple. And I've talked, and my listeners will be bored with this because I've made comments about this section of the book before, but I really like it because he talks about when Apple brought Jobs back and their stock had completely tanked and the company was basically bankrupt. Jobs figured out, and Thiel kind of quotes him in the book, that a company with amazing distribution and a mediocre product can still succeed, but the inverse is not true. So you could have the best product in the world, but if your distribution sucks, you're screwed, right?
I agree.
And that's why he came back. And one of the first things he did was start working on the concept for the Apple stores. It's like, hey, let's control that consumer experience, make sure they have a really positive experience, kind of all the way through the funnel, and then fill the funnel with great product. And as you look at growing GOB and bringing new products to market, and you're clearly focused on more than just earplugs, from what I can tell. Is this a D2C play? Is this you want these things sold at Walmart and Amazon? Like, what is your vision for distribution with your company?
Yeah, I think if you want to be successful out in the world physically at retail stores, venues, these days you have to have brand awareness, and that starts with D2C. And so we are scaling our D2C for that reason. We're in a retailer, e-com retailer in the UK called Health, Healf, and we're in Urban Outfitters. They tend to reach out to new brands and test them out early, so low-hanging fruit. But we want to spread, for lack of a better way to say it, like a virus. We want to be everywhere. And our products that we create, they have the added benefit of being relevant and ubiquitous in so many places. And that means, white labeling to factories for PPE, all the way to being in like the Air Ones of the world, music venues, hotels, airlines, the list goes on, motorsports. So, but we can't do all of it at once because then you run the risk of basically doing everything kind of okay and nothing great. So what we're doing is we're building that brand awareness. We sold this summer in a few New York City music venues. Our sales were great. We had vending machines at one, GOB Green. They were very cool. And we sold at the bars.
That's cool.
Selling at the bars at the venue, because we were just available where you were buying your drinks, it performed really well. So we know that works. We'll do that again and again and again in live event spaces. For now, we're working on...
Is there like some sort of POP or a way to... So when someone's at a bar and they say, hey, I just need a pair of earplugs, it's loud in here. Are they aware that they're buying something that is compostable, biodegradable, or are they just buying a pair of earplugs?
The packaging says it on it.
Okay, cool.
Honestly, we kind of need them to know that they're slightly different because you don't do the pinch and squeeze part. You just push them in. Slightly different, like how to use, but venues love when we advertise that because it makes them look good. It makes them think, it makes their fans say, oh, these people care. So
can they be used over and over again? Is there a repeatability, or are they a single-use product?
They're single use, but memory foam is supposed to be single use anyway because it's porous and Think about the exchange of bacteria from your ear to your hand, back in, on the ground, back in. You can get an ear infection real quick. It happens a lot. So people reuse memory foam, but they're not supposed to.
Interesting. Okay. And is your vision to build a product company, or are you trying to create like a new category, like of business, or both?
I'd say both. Short answer is both. Yeah. Again, we're looking at every single-use product people use constantly. Everyone has that drawer or cabinet in their bathroom or their house in the closet. And we're taking all those products and we're removing all the plastics and toxins from it and creating an elevated experience. Basically, reinventing single use is creating a category because no one fully owns the category. There are a bunch of companies that have single SKUs that built a brand in that SKU. For example, Breathe Right strips.
Mm-hmm.
They only sell nasal strips. Huge company, does very well, but they only do that. Earplugs. Max earplugs. They only do earplugs. And no one fully owns single use, and that's our plan, is to build out a large category.
So I guess related question then, if you look 10 years down the road, both for you personally as the founder and CEO, but also for the company, what does success look like?
Success looks like replacing as many of those products as possible. For our business, it means creating a culture that in a business where people want to work, just as much as creating products that people want to purchase. It's really important to me. For me personally, I don't want to lose track of who I am as a person. I think hustle culture has had its moment. I want to remain healthy and I want to continue to, do the things I love, mountain biking, trail running, getting out, because those are the types of things that connect me back to what inspires me to keep building the business. So I'd say it's a multi-prong approach, but my brain tends to live in the 10 years from now world. I'm a very future focused person. So I feel like I can already see it and it's possible. It's just a matter of putting in the work, chop wood, carry water, as they say.
I love that. So last question, I've really enjoyed this, so thank you. Something I talk about on the show a lot is I was a writer and a journalist before I started my first business, and I continue to be punished for decisions I made 17, 18, 19 years ago because I just didn't know what I was doing. And so my general philosophy in business is make every mistake once. You got to learn from it and then you move on, right? And that's how I've learned and grown. And so a question I ask every guest is, as you think back on your arc, at PROWL and now GOB, and then you kind of think about where you're headed with your company, what's the biggest mistake you made and what did you learn from it?
I think my biggest mistake has just been, it's more of a general, it wasn't like a single thing, but it was listening to people's advice as if it is the way things need to be. And I think that tends to be a thing with female entrepreneurs, is we take advice to heart maybe more. And I've taken people's advice on hiring people that I shouldn't have hired. And I wasn't listening enough to my gut and the signals that were present. I was taking maybe mentorship a little bit too far, I would say. And I've learned to always double check myself and sitting back before I make hard decisions. And it comes with not acting too quickly on decisions. It comes with bringing more people to the table and being a little bit more collaborative in my decision making. So it's definitely changed the way I move the business and the way I make decisions. And I'd say I'm still working on it, but I don't take people's advice anymore for face value, because most of the time people don't have the full context that you have as a business owner. And that's super important. And I learned that lesson really hard.
That's a really good answer. I appreciate it. Lauryn, this has been great. For people who want to learn more about you, about GOB, learn how to buy the product, follow your journey, where do they go?
You can follow us on Instagram, gob.earth. That's also our website, www.gob.earth. And yeah, please reach out, DM us if you have questions, thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Love what you're building, not just because it's a product, but it's a new way of thinking about waste and culture and what single use should mean. And I think that's really important.
I appreciate
it. Yeah, you bet. To everyone tuning in, thank you for joining us for another episode of Only the Strong Survive. If you enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. You can catch up on all of our past episodes on both YouTube and Spotify or wherever you get podcasts. I'm Dan Kahn. Thanks for listening. See you next time.